Welcome to Natural Habitat Adventures Daily Dose of Nature. Today's topic, Kanha National Park, India's Conservation Triumph, presented by NatHab Expedition Leader Yaju. I'm your host, Rob Mess. Thank you for being here with us today. Yaju, take it away.
Thank you, Rob, and greetings to all and welcome from India. We are in the monsoon season here in India and our national parks are shut. So, great time for you all to know about the stories of the national parks. So, today we talk about Kanha National Park. Kanha National Park is one of the earliest established national parks in India and is known as the undisputed king of Indian wilderness. In the next 45 minutes, we'll get to know why. But before we start, just a little about myself. My name is Yaju Upadhyaya, and I live on the edge of Kanha Tiger Reserve. I have been working for Natural Habitat Adventures for a little over 2 years now, but before that, I have been guiding in Kanha for almost a decade. Working in Kanha National Park for over a decade has given me a lot of opportunities to see the park close up, work with the park management, help them in multiple things as volunteer like patrolling, animal surveys, tiger surveys. So that's me. So few of the things that we'll talk about Kanha today is number one, the location of Kanha, a little about the geology of Kanha, the historical timeline as to how Kanha became the king of Indian wilderness, the conservation measures that the park management took to make sure that Kanha becomes one of the best parks in India, and the impacts of ecotourism that Kanha has had over the last few decades. So, here on this earth, you can see the outline of India. This is India for those of us who don't know, and we'll zoom in right into Kanha National Park. This is where Kanha National Park is, and this is we are just above the Tropic of Cancer and in an area which is known as the Central Indian Highlands. So this is how they look up close. So a little about their geology. These highlands were formed during uh, during a time which was known as the time where volcanic activity was at its peak around 65 to 70 million years ago, known as the Deccan Traps. Some tectonic movements which made sure that when India collided with the Eurasian plate, this also raised this landscape a little, and erosion. Over the million of years, erosion by wind, rain, and rivers shaped these hills into their current form with steep slopes, valleys, and plateaus. In India, this region is also known as the Maikal Hills. The forests in this area have been dominated by a species of tree called sal, which is known to be present here since the last 50,000 years. Sal is also called a climax species because it dominates the forest, maintaining a self-sustaining ecosystem. This is how a sal forest looks. They mostly grow in pure stands, and only a few other species are known to grow with the sal trees. They are also what we call semi-evergreen. So you can say that it means that the tree never goes leafless. Throughout the year, some or the other part of the tree will have leaves. Let's get into the brief timeline of Kanha. From the last 10,000 years till the 1800s, this area was dominated or ruled by two primitive tribes of India, one the Gonds and the other the Begas. These people practiced cultivation in a way which was locally known as Bewar, but in English we call it slash and burn cultivation. So as you can see in this picture here, what they do is they burn a patch of the forest, use the ashes as fertilizer, and farm on that for 3 to 5 years. And historically, what they used to do is after 3 to 5 years, they would leave this area and let the forestry go and practice the same kind of farming in a different area. By the mid 1800s, the British had arrived into the scene, and by 1879, Kanha was declared as a reserve forest, but no attention to wildlife or special attention to wildlife was given. A lot from the 1879 till the early 1900s, a lot of logging of sal trees was done. Sal again is a very hard wood, and this wood was mainly used to make sleeper for the railway tracks. Sleepers are or used to be the wooden planks that were placed between railway tracks. Today, in the modern age, everything's been replaced by concrete. But this is what one of the major uses of sal trees was. Moving into the early 1900s, this area was notified as a district officer's shooting block in 1931. Rampant hunting used to take place. As you can see in this picture, I had to, very old picture found in the archive records, and I had to enhance it just so that you all can get a view of it. And in 1933, 100 square miles of this area was declared as an absolute sanctuary, but hunting was still allowed. 10 years later, in 1943, this area was reduced to 50 square miles to encourage hunting. This was a time when in India, hunting tourism used to take place. We have records that in 1945, more than 250 spotted deer were shot right in the heart of the sanctuary. The next slide has some disturbing images, but please bear with me. This is from around 90, image is from between 1947 to 1951, where one of the Maharajas from southern India shot around 30 tigers in just 5 years in this area. This was also the same time when India got independence from British rule. The year was 1947, and in 1955, the park was declared as a national park by the government of India, and round about 100 square miles of this landscape were declared as a national park. In the next 25 years, 100 more square miles were added to this national park, and by 1969, the first village was relocated from this national park. Now, can you imagine a country like India, which is known for its population, in this area to relocate a village? The tough job. But interestingly, the village was relocated for the conservation of a very special species of deer that we will talk about after a few slides. Fast forwarding to the 1970s, as tiger numbers had dropped drastically in India, our government launched Project Tiger. This was a project to save the tiger, and initially, 9 tiger reserves, including Kanha, were added to Project Tiger. These were known as the last surviving home of the tiger in India. At that time, Kanha had an estimate of around 20 to 30 individual tigers. At the same time, this species of deer that you see in the picture, the southern swamp deer or the Barasinga as we locally call it, had dropped drastically to only 66 in number. This was pointed out by a very popular American naturalist, Dr. George Schaller, who was studying the deer and the tiger in Kanha National Park in the 1970s. Now imagine this deer, uh, 50 years ago, was found in an area which was close to 39,000 square miles, but by the 1970s was restricted to just about 5 to 10 square miles of one national park. This actually made headlines. And the reasons for their decline, now as you can see in this picture, we have a beautiful male stag. So rampant trophy hunting. We have hunting records from the 50s that say that in India, in Kanha, in fact, to hunt a tiger, the cost at that time was around 250 Indian rupees, which and to hunt a Barasinga was around 2000 Indian rupees at the same time. That is how big a prized possession the Barasinga was. The other decline, a cause for decline of the Barasinga was the loss of habitat because of increase in agriculture and due to cattle grazing. As we spoke about slash and burn cultivation uh, initially, with the onset of the British rule in the early 1900s, the British people actually gave cattle to the local Gond and Bega tribals living in this area to make sure that they plow the same land again and again instead of burning the forest. This led to a lot of cattle grazing in this national park. So, for the revival of the Barasinga, meetings took place, government got involved, IUCN got involved, and short term initiatives were set by the park management. Hunting was banned, there's plans of relocating more villages, and you know, within a few years, the surviving population of Barasinga, which was just around 69, started responding very swiftly and started dispersing to abandoned village sites. And now Barasinga is a very specific deer because it's something that we call as a gramnivore. So it has a very specific diet and feeds on a handful of species of grass and aquatic plants. To increase the number of Barasinga more habitat improvement works were done by the park management, like creating water tanks, stopping cattle grazing, and lot of improvement or focus was given to the improvement of grasslands to increase the deer population, which in turn would help the tiger population of Kanha. This is how an improved grassland, from the previous picture, you can see how tall the grass can be. Now, why is tall grass important for the Barasinga? So, Barasinga rarely ventures into the forest and they mostly are restricted to the grasslands of the park, and they also make dens when they're about to give birth for their young ones. This is how a typical den of a Barasinga looks. Over the next 20-25 years, Kanha National Park started growing, animal numbers started picking up, and new management plans started coming into action. And Kanha also was one of the first national parks in India to notify a buffer zone. Now, what is the buffer zone? So, the buffer zone is something that is simply put as an exterior forest. In India, our tiger reserves have two zones. One is called the core zone, where no human activity apart from tourism in an area of less than 20% and patrolling takes place. Now, buffer zone is more tolerated. Here we have a few villages, as you can see in this picture here. You can see pups of endangered Indian wild dogs or dholes living in the buffer zone. Local villagers have rights. They are allowed to go into the forest, they're allowed to collect the fruits and flowers, and they are also allowed to collect the dead wood, which can be used as firewood. So Kanha actually notified close to 500 square miles as the buffer zone. And this is also the time when poaching became rampant, as our parks were still new, funds were less, enough patrolling could not be done. And from the early 1990s and the 2000s, a lot of focus was given to increasing the tiger numbers. To tiger numbers, to monitor the tigers, technologies like camera trapping using trail cameras at specific areas where tigers move through. This also became the cornerstone for counting our tigers. Now, what the park management would do is first they would look for pug marks of tigers. Wherever they would find a lot of pug marks of tigers, they would place these camera traps. And as you can see, there are some park management people who are placing the camera traps. On the right, you see the photo of a tigress. Now, this is the kind of image that the park management are trying to procure. And they try and procure this image from both sides, and they take these stripes on their side flanks and create a database. As we all know, tigers have different stripes. Every individual tiger will have different stripes. So this helps us in maintaining account and identification of our tigers. Almost at the same time, to know more about the tiger, park management also started radio collaring the tiger. You can see some pictures. This is thanks to my dear friends who work with the park management. So before fitting the radio collar, the health of the tiger, their teeth, their paws are checked. And radio collaring of tigers provided us with intricate details and insights into the tiger's life, offering us information about their territorial range and moving and resting patterns. This is how a radio collared tiger looks. This also helped us, radio collaring, to know more about the migration of tigers. As tigers are known to disperse at around 18 months old, uh, this helped us in identifying historical tiger corridors and newer tiger habitat, and which helped us in establishing newer protected areas, or of course also increasing the size of the national park. So around Kanha, two crucial tiger corridors were identified, and one of them today has, as per the last information by the park management, has movement of close to 40 big cats. Apart from tigers, we also collared the Indian wild dog that you see in this picture here. You can see a collar on our left. This was very recent, around 2018, and very endangered and understudied animal in our country. And Kanha was, in fact, the first national park to radio collar the dhole in 2018. And amazing information, as you know, or you may be aware that these are animals known to always be on the move. So within 3 days of radio collaring this particular dhole pack, the dholes had moved close to 70 miles away from where they were radio collared. And within a week, they had also come back. So imagine the way they move. Amazing. I was very fortunate to, help the park management in finding out a den site, and for all the people who are coming on our Grand India wildlife adventure, where we stay in Kanha for 4 nights. We have a great chance of spotting dholes. They're doing really well in Kanha now. Last 2 years, if I'm not wrong, most of our groups have had phenomenal sightings of dholes or Indian wild dogs. Now I'll just quickly show you the different kinds of habitats that are there in Kanha. Number one, dense sal forest. This is how, when you're doing your safaris, especially on a winter mornings, this is how your sal forest looks. Great for photographers. Here you see a mix of habitats: meadows, old village sites, natural grasslands, streams. Now, as you know, that over the last 70 years, since Kanha was declared as a national park, habitat management is important. The climate has changed so much. Rainfall has changed, the temperatures have changed. We all talk about climate change, coming in big time. This results in a big change in habitats of the park, and especially the grassland. As you remember, most of these grasslands were actually all old village sites, and over a period of time, what happens is invasive species starts taking over these grasslands. So the park management, as you can see in this picture here, this is a very vicious invasive plant from Central America called lantana, and it just loves the forests of India and grows like wildfire. N- Now the problem with lantana is that it does not let any of the other species or the local species grow. So periodically, using people from the local community, the park management clear small sections of it. It's an ongoing process, and you have to keep doing it for multiple years for lantanas to disappear, because they've their seeds are already in the ground for many years. And after you remove the lantana, this is how the habitat looks. Another one of our problems that we face in our national parks is forest fires. Now what happens is, especially in the buffer zones where people are allowed to collect fruits and flowers in India, what they do is, many a times underneath a fruiting tree, They will light a small fire so that it clears the undergrowth around the fruiting tree, and it becomes easier for them to collect the fruits. But negligence sometimes, results to forest fires, and our park management then has to employ local staff. As you can see, two people here on the little center left of your screen trying to mitigate the fire. So what our park also does is create fire breakers. These fire breakers are open patches that run like roads through sections of the park. Close to around 300 kilometers of fire breakers are there in our park. And before the onset of the dry season, the park management will burn these fire breakers or whatever undergrowth and grass is there in these fire breakers, so that if there's a fire coming from one of the sides, it becomes very easy to control. With the loss of grassland, and the increasing population of deer, we often face a problem of overgrazing. So Kanha Park Management is spending a lot of time in the upkeep of its grasslands. A lot of research is going on, and here you can see in this picture, park management is doing a census. They've marked out what is called a quadrant, and they're trying to document what are the various species of grass that are growing, what is the grass which is disappearing. What they do with this study is the park management tends to create fences in certain areas of the grassland, square or rectangular shaped, big fenced off areas where grass can grow undisturbed for 2 to 3 seasons and come back to their natural state. And once the grass has grown enough, they remove the fence and pick up another part of the grassland and repeat the same procedure. Now, interesting photo. How did the tiger get inside the fence? So, as you know, once the grass starts growing, many of the animals, especially wild boar, tend to dig holes below the fences and go in to feed on the grass and roots and tubers of the plants, and the tiger follows it inside. With the betterment of the grasslands, our herbivore population started thriving, and Kanha took another step in wildlife conservation and management. Two unique initiatives you can see in the two pictures that you see. The fence on the left is a part of the fenced off grassland, but the channel that you see made on the left, this is to capture deer. We call it the boma capture method, and this is a funnel shaped fence which is made in a grassland, and there's a truck which is lined up on one side, and from the other side, once the deer are inside this fence, they are herded into the truck. This helps us, or helps the park management in relocating deer into areas where the deer population is less. Also, Kanha has a distinction of relocating deer to many national parks in India, especially, I don't know if you've heard, we've got cheetahs in India now, and Kanha is one of the important places from where we are taking the deer and relocating it to the park called Kuno, where cheetahs have been relocated. Now, the fence on the right that you see here, where I'm pointing my cursor, this is a part of an enclosure known as the gorilla enclosure. Over the last 15 to 20 years, Kanha has earned a distinction where if the park management, when they are out on patrol or if they come across orphaned tiger cubs, they are rescued and they are rewilded or taught the ways of the wild. So this enclosure or the fence that you see on the right is the big enclosure. Within this, there are multiple enclosures. Initially, when the if the depends on the size or the age at which the cub is found, the cub is put in a very small enclosure where they are given milk. Then once it's big enough, they are fed meat. They start with goat, chicken, pigs, and then this big enclosure that you see, which is a few hectares, this is where the tiger learns to hunt. There are deer that are in this enclosure, and with minimal human interference, nobody outside the park management is allowed to enter or see the proceedings of this enclosure. They just want it to be as human free as possible. And thanks to this gorilla enclosure, Kana has been able to relocate tigers to many tiger reserves. One which I personally know had gone tigerless, around 20 years back and is now thriving with tigers. So this is again a great conservation measure that takes place in Kanha. Now with all these conservation measures that is taken place, Kanha has a booming density of ungulates. A recent study, which was published just a few months back, tells us that Kanha has the highest density of ungulates or herbivores in India. The total prey species population in Kanha National Park is more than 100,000. Here you can see some of the iconic species. Spotted deer, where my cursor is. This is the most common species of deer that you find in Kanha. Sambar, a distant relative of your Rocky Mountain elk, which is more of the forest deer. We've got the swamp deer or the Barasingha that we spoke about. Gaur, the largest cattle in the world, and the seldom seen mouse deer. With this high prey species has resulted in high tiger numbers. A data from the government of India from 2022 tells us that more than 130 tigers are utilizing Kanha Tiger Reserve. Most of them who live right inside the tiger reserve, and some who live on the fringes. Apart from tigers, our leopards are thriving as well. An estimate from 2022 tells us that we have more than 200 leopards in and around Kanha National Park. But leopards, let me tell you, are one of the most difficult predators to spot in the national park. What we are getting lucky with from the last few years are dholes. Here, this is from a trip that I led in April. A dhole pack, 11 adults, 11 pups. They just finished a big spotted deer stag kill and just enjoying finishing picking up the crumbs over here. We have an estimate of around 50 to 60 dhole individuals. This is just an estimate. Now, with this thriving population, just a few highlights of what Kanha has done. From 1969 till date, more than 40 villages have been relocated from the national park or tiger reserve. Most of these villages had the local gonds and beggars, and this is a house from outside the national park. And when you decide to visit Kanha on the Grand India Wildlife Adventure, you will get an opportunity to interact with these people whose ancestors vacated way for animals. Where in the world happens, you know, people making way for animals. Also, our buffer zones are thriving. During certain times of the year, we do get to do night excursions in the buffer zone of Kanha Tiger Reserve, and sometimes we do get very lucky with animal sightings. But who is responsible for this success? According to us, it is these people, the forest guards. These are the people who 365 days a year live inside the national park, walking 10 to 15, sometimes 17, 18 kilometers a day through water, checking out if there are any kind of illegal activities happening inside the park. Anybody is trying to do some hunting, anybody is trying to cut wood. These are the people. Even in the heaviest of rains, they are out on patrol. Yes, we do use elephants to patrol the park, especially during the rainy season where foot patrol or mobile patrol becomes inaccessible. Elephants become the best all wheel drives. Apart from the forest guards, some more people that I would like to mention who are integral in saving the forest are the local people. The local tribals who live in and around Kanha worship the forest. Even today, you will see small shrines when you visit the national park where local people during certain times of the year are allowed to go and give their prayers. If you go and sit and talk to them, they'll, their ways of utilizing the forest are so marginal. Only take what you need. And we will get a chance once you're in Kana, one of the days we will get a chance to visit the local community and spend a few hours with them. This now, the local community, apart from protecting the forest, has also been impacted with ecotourism. In the last 12 or 13 years that I've been here, I've been very fortunate to see the local communities grow. You know, most of the staff in the hotels that we are staying is local. Most of the boys driving the jeeps that you'll see in the park will be locals. You know, our park guides, like this lady that you can see smiling after a tiger sighting, will be local from just the neighboring village of the park. The lodges that we stay in will also be sourcing their food locally, you know, from a 30, 40, 50-mile radius, depending upon the availability of vegetables during the certain season. Today, in total, estimates tell us that close to 2.9 million Indian rupees goes back into the local community. And this is really helping the local community. As we can see, more and more youngsters want to come and work in the park, want to become park guides, want to become jeep drivers, want to become naturalists, or want to work with the park management as protectors. So this has the the park growing with tourists coming in has really changed the youth in this area. At certain times when I first came here, people always wanted to go out and work into cities, but now the youth wants to stay here and work with the park, enjoy nature, track tigers when you come here, get that big smile on your face, and lead the simple life. And with this, I conclude my presentation. And time for any questions.
Okay, thank you, Yaju. Now, before we dive into the question and answer session, I would like to remind, excuse me, I'd like to remind everyone that if you do have questions, you can submit them via the question field in your control panel. If you go to the upper right-hand corner of the go-to screen, you'll see those three lines. Click on those three lines and it'll open up the menu. You can scroll on down and go to questions and pop them in there. All right, so let's jump into these questions. So, do the axis deer live in the park?
Yes,
They do. Okay,
the
great.
spotted deer. We have more than 50,000 deer living inside the park right now.
Wow, that's quite a bit. Um, so in the South Forest, is the threat of wildfires something that you deal with there, similar to us here in the American West?
We do have forest fires, but not as the scale as we hear from the United States. The massiveness because of forest fire prevention measures that the park undertakes. We've not had a massive case of forest fire in the past few years.
Can you talk about the type of steps they take to mitigate the fires?
Number one is, extensive patrolling. That's one of the most important things that can be done to reduce the forest fire. And the fire breakers. So what the park management does is, or it has already done, this has been done at least 30, 40 years back, is create cleared forests and like roads, and they've made open patches between forests which stretch for kilometers in one go. And
Gotcha.
they burn this before the start of the fire season.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Thank you for that.
So this helps in, when a forest fire comes from one side. This helps in the park management in controlling the fire so that it does not go to the other side.
Makes sense. Thank you for that. We really appreciate that. Um, So we know that tigers and humans are often in the same areas together. How do the villagers and the tigers live together? Is it dangerous for each of them?
Well, what the locals tell us is that our ancestors have been living with the wildlife for centuries now. So the locals actually will get more scared if you send them to a city as a part to making them walk in the forest. Even at night, they will walk carelessly, in any forest. But one important thing is there, they are excellent tree climbers, all locals. So if they spot a danger or anything, they'll be quick enough to climb a tree. This is on a lighter note, but they coexist well. Of course, we do have few cases of tigers killing cattle of locals, especially the cattle which stray inside the national park, or sometimes tigers that stray outside the national park. But man-animal conflict directly, at least in Kanha National Park, is very minimal.
Gotcha. Thank you. And cattle, of course, can't climb trees, so they're not
Yeah.
they're not as lucky as us. Uh, so, how do you determine whether a tiger cub is indeed orphaned or is just waiting for their mother to return from hunting?
So last time, when this the last tiger cub that was actually rescued from Kanha, this was just before 2020, and this was a young tiger during the monsoons that was seen floating in a stream. And the park management, and very very young, I think around 2 months old, and the park management actually rescued that cub, And then they what they did was they tried to look out for all camera trap photos to match their stripes and see who is the mother. And once they found out the photo of the mother, they tried to locate the mother, as the mother also had one more cub, but the mother and the other cub were never found. So that is when the park decided to take the orphan cub into the enclosure. Also, many of the times we do come across tigers. If they are hunting, they get a bad injury and they die, and that they have cubs because of camera traps or trail cameras that are placed in the park, or by tourists who've taken photos. So these are some of the ways that we get to know which tiger is orphaned and which is not.
Gotcha. Thank you for letting us know that. Um, so we talked about some of these villages that were relocated. How has life changed for those in the relocated villages? Is their life improved, or did it create new problems? Can you talk about that a little bit?
So there are two ways to look at the relocations. The early relocations that we spoke about in the late 60s, the 70s, and 80s, you know, they were more of forceful evictions, you can say. So they got land, the people got land, but they were forced to go out. But the last bit of relocations, which happened close to 2010 or in the 2000s, every adult in every household was given 1 million Indian rupees, and which the locals found it to be a good sum. Land was not given, money was given. It's in India, it is a decent amount to start something for yourself. If you want to have a shop, or if you want to open a garage, or a grocery store. So, of course, there are both sides to the coin, but more or less, from what we know about people in and around Kanha, people were happy with the relocation, especially the last bit.
Gotcha. Thank you for talking about that. So let's talk about the Barasinga deer population. You said it went down to 69. So
Yes.
what steps were taken to encourage genetic diversity?
Whatever studies the park management has done, they've told us that the genetic diversity or the genetics of the Barasinga is still fine. So no particular steps, you know, because eventually these Barasinga were only restricted to this park, nowhere else when the study happened, and in the 70s. So there's no particular steps to create or get in a new Barasinga from somewhere to mix up the genetics. But what is happening now is the older habitats slowly and steadily, Kanha is giving out or relocating small batches of Barasinga to older habitats, and it's already happened in two national parks, and this eventually will make sure with time that the genetic diversity is maintained.
Gotcha. Thank you. So how well staffed is Kana? Are there female rangers working in the park?
Oh yes, there are female rangers. There are female in India. Ranger is a pretty high term. It's a big officer. They generally control an area of around 100 to 200 square miles. They are the boss of that area. So yes, from the foot soldiers whose photos that you saw, they do the patrolling, to the senior most officers or bosses of the park. Females are there in every sector.
Great to know. Thank you. So we talked about radio collars. Are they ever used, say, by guides to find out where the animals are?
No, no, no. And currently, in Kanha, starting from around 2005, 2006 to up to 2014, 15, a lot of radio collaring was done. And right now no radio collaring is happening. But even in the other national parks, this is not for tourism and just for research.
Gotcha. Good to know.
Yeah.
So, can you talk about what's coming in the future for the park? Are they looking to expand in an area or introduce some more wildlife?
Yes, there are talks about a historic or an animal that used to exist in Kanha before, as per historic records, called the wild water buffalo, which is right now restricted to the northeast of India only. But Kanha also was home to them a few hundred years back. So there is some bit of feasibility study that is happening on that, and whatever feasibility study has happened is has been very positive. Apart from that, few years back we also had wild elephant knocking on the edges of the national park. If they return back, that will be a big return. But this is all the wild elephants. It's all natural because the neighboring areas of Kanha there was some conflict and the elephants moved here. But they were not they didn't become residents. They returned back. If you talk about increasing the size of the park, very difficult because the park is already one of the biggest in India. As you know, India is a country of 1.4 billion people, and but yes, connections or corridors. There's a lot more focus on protecting the corridors so that those corridors can also become reserve forests in the future, and it will help maintain the genetic diversity of animals.
Gotcha. Thank you, Yaju, for that answer. Unfortunately, that is going to be the last question that we do have time for today. So, well, I'd like to hand it back to you for any closing comments you may have for us.
Well, we are waiting for you here in India. Right now, the monsoons are on and the parks are shut. So, do plan the Grand India Adventure or any of the India trips. And Kanha, if you plan the Grand India Adventure trip, you will be mesmerized by each and every park, but definitely by Kanha. Trust me. So, looking forward to seeing all of you, or at least some of you, in India this year in the coming season.
Yaju, thank you so much for taking the time to present for us today. And I'd also like to thank everyone who joined us today. So, if you are interested in information on how you could travel to India with NatHab, please give us a call at 800-543-8917, or you can send us an email at info@nathab.com. Our adventure specialists are happy to help you out. Join us Monday for our next daily dose of nature. You can check out next week's lineup, including registration links, on our website at nathab.com/webinars. We did record today's presentation, and we will have the replay available on our website soon. With that, I'd like to conclude today's webinar. Goodbye, everybody. We will see you next time.